When I say the words match fixing, what do you think of? Take a second, I'll wait. Is it an Asian betting syndicate rigging matches in Italy's third division? Or possibly an Italian mafia fixing a game in Romania? Or maybe you were thinking of a rogue referee who's just looking for a little bit of extra cash. Whatever you were thinking of, I doubt it was the boardroom of a La Liga club in Spain. Yet while match fixing may feel distant to the average fan, it's now proven to be hiding in plain sight.
Bueno, pues son las últimas palabras que pronunciaban algunos de los principales encausados en ese denominado caso Osasuna el pasado día 28 de febrero cuando quedó visto para sentencia.
Less than 2 weeks ago, 2 players and 5 executives from Real Betis and Osasuna were convicted of sporting corruption and sentenced to prison. It's the first time in the history of La Liga that has happened. Today, we look at the ramifications of the Osasuna case and explore the long history of match tampering in Spain.
So Osasuna is the football club of the city of Pamplona, which is the biggest city in the autonomous region of Navarra.
Richard Martin is a journalist and covers Spanish football.
About 200,000 people live in Pamplona. To be honest, it's quite a sleepy city. For most of the year, it's most famous for having the San Fermines festival, which is a huge event, and that kind of takes over the whole city. The city almost exists for San Fermines.
We're here in early July for the Festival of San Fermin, and that means the running of the bulls, one of Europe's most exuberant festivals.
And it's an interesting city. It's kind of divided between two sets of people, in a sense that you have people who are very in favor of the Basque Country, identify as with the Basque region, although Navarra is not officially part of the Basque Country. And then another half of the city is very, very conservative, quite religious, and they identify with Spain, and they have no time for Basque nationalism and quite against it. So it's quite a divided city in some ways.
You lived in Pamplona once upon a time. When did you live there? And can you take me back to what the club was like when you were there?
When I was living in Pamplona, Osasuna spent most of the season fighting against relegation. Before then, they'd actually had a good run. They reached the Copa del Rey final in 2005, which they lost to Real Betis. They also came fourth in La Liga in 2006. That was their joint best ever finish in the top flight. They qualified for the Champions League playoffs. They didn't make it through to the group stage, but they made it into the UEFA Cup, and they reached the semi-finals of the UEFA Cup. So it was actually a pretty strong period for Osasuna, although this season was the season when things were starting to come apart.
So when you were there, was there any suspicion of match fixing?
Yes. It wasn't always called match fixing, but basically I first noticed that there could be some match fixing going on when I was following Osasuna very closely, and they were really looking like they were going to be relegated, and their last 2 games of the season were away to Barcelona and at home to Real Madrid. And I said to a friend of mine who followed Osasuna as a journalist, I said, wow, they're in real trouble. And he's like, no, I think we'll be okay. And I said, seriously, you've got Real Madrid and Barcelona in your last 2 games? He's like, no, we have a good relationship with those clubs, and those clubs aren't playing for anything, so I'm quite confident we're going to win. And I was like, this is an extremely bizarre thing to say. This makes me think that something else is going on here. You would never be talking about this for example, in England. And he said that we have good relationship with these clubs. And so I went to the final game of the season, Real Madrid against Osasuna, and Osasuna won 2-1. Now, at the time, I was thinking, there's something not quite right about Real Madrid's performance in this match. They took the lead 1-0 up, and then they kind of seemed to take their foot off the gas. Now, that's not to say that it's cut and dry. They did some good things in the game. They stopped a couple of Osasuna chances. I remember a header off the line.
And it was a well-worked move from Osasuna. That ball was going in. The Iranian can't believe it.
So you couldn't say that they were lying down, but there were definitely certain instances of players doing things, making a pass instead of a shot, which made you think that something wasn't quite right about that game. But everyone kind of got carried away with the emotion, and it was a great achievement. They stayed up, they beat Real Madrid 2-1, and there was a pitch invasion.
Osasuna are a first division team.
Great feeling in the city. And then a few days later, I was speaking to someone about Osasuna, and they just said to me, I said, "Oh, what a great performance!" And she just expression on her face changed. Said, "We all know that wasn't an honest game. We all know that something else was going on in that match. That Real Madrid weren't trying that hard." And then a few years later, when Osasuna were being investigated, they were being investigated for the 2012-13 and 2013-14 seasons. But the president of Valladolid, Carlos Suarez, said he first had suspicions about Osasuna in the 2008-09 season and those last two matches against Real Madrid and Real Valladolid. And Carlos Suarez explained this to the police in investigations in 2015 about Osasuna's activities.
So this was common knowledge to a lot of people, not just like you and another journalist, but, we're talking about like everyday people on the street.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if another team doesn't have anything else to play for in the last few games of the season, there is so much suspicion that that team is not going to try that hard in that game. Now, some people will say that's just because there's no motivation, and others would argue that that's because they're being paid.
So how did this case come about that we're talking about with Osasuna? Who told the authorities?
This all begins when Osasuna changed presidents in 2014, and the new president, Luis Zabalza, denounces the previous regime to the authorities. They do an audit of their accounts and they notice irregularities in the account, a lot of money which had left the accounts. This club money had left the accounts and not been accounted for and not been declared.
How much money are we talking about?
A total of 2.4 million euros.
So quite a lot.
Quite a lot.
Yeah. Okay, so he finds, 2.4 million euros missing from the account. Then what happens after that?
So they alert the authorities and they agree to be a witness in the case against the previous regime. And that leads to Angel Vizcay, the managing director at the time of the club, giving a confession on camera in the offices of La Liga in 2015.
Then the investigation really takes shape after that confession. And I'm going to fast forward to April 24th of this year, not too long ago. What happened on that day?
So April 24th, 2020 was a historic day for Spanish football. It was the first ever conviction for match fixing. There've been a number of court cases, a number of investigations. This was the first time people had ever been found guilty of match fixing. And so Angel Vizcay, the former managing director, was given a prison sentence of 8 years and 8 months for crimes including sworn corruption, falsification of documents, and falsification of accounts. The club's former president, Miguel Archancho, was given 6 years and 8 months for the same crimes. Osasuna's former vice president, Juan Antonio Pascual, was given a prison sentence of 6 years and 6 months. And former directors Jesus Peralta and Sancho Banderas were also given prison sentences.
And they're not the only ones. There are also some players involved in this, right?
Antonio Amaya and Xavi Torres were found guilty of receiving 650,000 euros from Osasuna at the time they played for Real Betis. And the accusation is that they helped Real Betis. They were paid money to ensure that Real Betis beat Real Valladolid and lost to Osasuna. Real Betis played Osasuna on the final day of the 2013-14 season, and they played Valladolid on the penultimate weekend of the 2013-14 season. So Betis beat Real Valladolid 4-3, and they lost to Osasuna. The court found that the players were paid a total of 650,000 euros to incentivize victory against Valladolid and to incentivize defeat against Osasuna. It's important to state that both players deny this, and Amaya was actually injured in one of those games, and he denies it, and he's going to appeal the sentence. But that's what the court found.
And there was also a third player involved, but he was ultimately acquitted of the allegations. So what did you make of these convictions? Obviously, there have been pretty heavy sentences for some of the people at the top. And as we mentioned earlier, this is a historic thing. Players haven't been actually convicted of crimes like this before. So what did you make of that?
It was surprising in that it's so hard to convict people for such a crime. We've had big court cases such as the case against Real Zaragoza for a match in 2011, and it had been proved that Real Zaragoza had 1.7 million euros unaccounted for, but they couldn't prove where that money had gone. So to actually prove that players had received this money from Osasuna with the aim of fixing these results was unprecedented. The court could actually find them guilty of this.
What was La Liga's reaction to all of this?
Well, La Liga have actually led the way in this whole process. Javier Tebas, who's the current president of La Liga, when he first became president in 2013, he said, I want to put an end to match fixing.
Pero es un cáncer.
But it's a cancer. It's a cancer that must be eradicated, and we all know it. And it has the same effect as cancer. And if we don't correct it immediately, it will propagate.
Se propaga.
Which is quite a brave thing to say when you've just joined an organization as the president. You're saying that it's dirty. It's a real bold statement to make, but it's in the interests of La Liga to make sure that any accusations of match fixing are dealt with. If La Liga's image is that of a game where we can't always trust the results, that's very damaging for La Liga, and so it's very important for them that they clean up. La Liga cleans up its act.
Well, at the time, he actually accused, in 2013, he said that there were 8 to 10 games per year in La Liga and La Liga 2 that involved match fixing. So, he was on the nose at that time.
Yeah, that's about 2% of games each year are fixed. So that's what he was saying. Yeah, it was really damaging, really strong stuff to be saying for a president of an organization about the organization he was heading up. He certainly led the way, and this court case, these convictions are down to that stance, because before it was something that the people didn't even see it as match fixing. It was very clear that a lot of these matches were not being played honestly, but no one was really taking responsibility for that. And so this is the first time that someone high up in the organization said, no, we have to put a stop to this.
You say this was so well known by fans and journalists. So what has been the reaction since the conviction of all of these players and administrators, of fans and of journalists?
For fans, it's been difficult for fans to really kind of raise their voices because there are no matches due to the coronavirus crisis. And I think it actually is a shame that the timing of this conviction, the coronavirus has overshadowed it, and it got a big play in the media, but perhaps didn't get as much play as it deserved. I think there still hasn't been a real reckoning in the media about this. One of the sad things about football fans is they're so self-interested. So before, we've seen fans accuse other teams of match fixing, of being dirty, but when the allegation is made at them, it's always, oh, it's nothing to do with us, or oh, there's nothing wrong with paying another team to try and win a game. There's nothing wrong with that. It's always self-interested.
And so do you think this will kind of change the precedent going forward? Do you think more match fixing cases like this will actually go to trial and there will be convictions or, acquittals?
This is certainly going to embolden the judicial system. I think La Liga were very proud that this conviction happened, and I think they'll be happy to see more of the like. And I think it will lead to more convictions. I think this won't be the last match fixing case we saw. And also, it also shows that these are things that happened over 6 years ago now, and a conviction has only just happened. And I think we're definitely going to see a lot more of these.
But as Richard pointed out earlier, this end-of-the-season match tampering was already commonplace in Spain. In fact, they had a term for it, maletines. So to trace the history of maletines, I spoke with Glasgow Live journalist and Spanish football aficionado, Craig Williams.
It basically means small briefcases. So the idea is that small briefcases were given by third parties between teams or between teams directly, and it's a word used which is kind of innocuous to take on purpose to really take the heat out of what can be or is a very serious kind of allegation directed at a player or team. And yeah, it's widely used within Spanish football to speak about possible third-party payments or payments concerning match fixing within football, and it dates back to the late 1940s, and I believe, well, it's reported in Spain that it was first used by the former chairman of Real Madrid, Santiago Bernabeu, in I think it was 1947-1948 season, referring to a small briefcase of payment that was allegedly received by Atletico Madrid to help Real Madrid avoid going down that season, which would have been the first time, I think, in their history that they would have done so from the main Spanish First Division.
Over the ensuing decades, the practice would become more popular and it became increasingly present within the game.
It's kind of like part and parcel of the game, as much as having a referee or having fans in the stadium. It's something that's always there and present. You know, the very term maletines, even the actual term itself is kind of part of the discourse, you know, within the game, within Spanish football, unfortunately, or as a matter of fact. And it's one that more often than not will rear its head up towards the end, if not on the last day of the season, where there's things to be won or lost, championships to be won, relegation to be fought over, a big 3 points as it were. That term maletines will always crop up somewhere, whether it be said in passing, in jest, or whether it be towards the more serious issue where players are perceived, or teams too are perceived, have kind of let down their guard or are trying harder than usual, as it were, to win a match where their own status in the league, for example, is safe.
And in case you still doubt the existence of maletines, Craig points out two examples from prominent foreign players who played in La Liga in the late 90s.
One that springs to mind straight away is the possibility or the allegation made by none other than Davor Suker, you know, Croatian legend, who can forget his chip in Euro 96 against Denmark.
They've found Suker, he's onside, Schmeichel's off his goal line. What trick can he come up with this time? Oh my word! Oh my word! That was a world-class goal!
He alleges that the Seville team received a bonus payment to draw against Barcelona, which would help Atletico win their famous double in 1996 and 1997. And he has spoken about that in the media, and he put it down to being customs unique to the Spanish league, and he wasn't exactly saying that there was any problems with doing that. And as I said, he pointed to a specific example of that happening. There's also, for example, a famous player for Celta Vigo who a lot of people will remember as Alexander Mostovoy. He, in an interview a few years back prior to a end-of-season game between Real Madrid and Celta, came out in the Spanish media, and when chat resurfaced about maletines, he noted that for 8 years he'd been receiving bonuses from the club towards the end of the season for games, and he made a quip that he felt like while Celta at the time were a very competitive team who were competing for kind of Europa League and Champions League places, he mentioned that sometimes he felt like it'd be better if the team were down the other half of the table because he might make more money from it.
So why would professional players risk their sporting integrity and going to prison? Well, as Richard points out, it all comes down to money.
The thing about Spanish football is that until recently, a lot of clubs just didn't pay players that well. In fact, it was a long time ago, 10, 15 years ago, a lot of players just wouldn't get paid on time, and their wages were much, much smaller than compared to in leagues like the Premier League, if outside of the big clubs like Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid and Barcelona. So actually it was quite a big incentive to win a match. If someone's offering you money to win a match, which you wouldn't be motivated to win otherwise because you've got nothing to play for, or indeed to lose a match. The figures which were discussed for which Osasuna had been found guilty of paying former Real Betis players 650,000 euros. It's a lot of money. If you're not at a top club, that's a lot of money.
But it bears repeating that it wasn't just at the top of the table that this was happening. Perhaps the most consequential alleged maletines occurred in the 1991-1992 La Liga season.
Tenerife, they beat Real Madrid on the last game of the season. I think it was in 1991, 1992. And Tenerife had already secured their permanence within La Liga. Madrid needed to win the league from Barcelona's grasp, but Tenerife ended up beating Real Madrid 3-2. And Jorge Valdano was the manager at the time, who ex-Real Madrid boss and ex-Real Madrid legendary player. So people would be under the assumption that there'd be no way in hell that an ex-Real Madrid player would set out to try and stop Real Madrid winning their own league. Allegations came out from that game in recent years from Tenerife's captain at the time, saying that when they arrived at training for allegedly at the start of the new season, there was a bag stuffed with cash outside the stadium from a third party that was paid to the players, and the players were all in on it, but the management staff weren't in on it. So yeah, just it's interesting that you get these ideas of pacts between teams, and even it can extend beyond that.
Craig Williams is a journalist for Glasgow Live, and Richard Martin is a journalist covering Spanish football. This episode was produced by John McKenzie and Hugo Chambray. I'm Josh Schneider-Weiler, and thanks for listening. And before you go, if you'd like bonus episodes and additional content, sign up for our new Football Today page on Patreon. And if you can't spare the cash, share the episode with a friend. Thanks for listening to Football Today. We'll be back on Thursday.